Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Covenant Cast. I'm Zach.
I'm Robert.
And I'm Jonathan.
And today, we are taking a trip to Arkham. All right, what have the two of you been up to this week? I will also note this is the first time I think we're on the 22, 23 episodes here. No Steven on the show.
Finally.
He's gone.
So Madhouse, he's on a trip.
We
prior to
finally
Gen
plowed
Con.
him under.
Yeah. So
we got rid of him.
What of the two? We get an update from both of you, and I will say, John, I need a land update.
gosh.
Everyone's asking about it.
Everyone.
Everyone.
As in really just
From person A
me.
to person B.
1-to-1 ratio here.
All right, so the land continues to... So let me just put it this way.
You're buying land for anyone that hasn't been listening.
I'm buying land. It's a long process, which at any point could completely fall through. So
Sounds exciting.
Yeah, it's great. As I was describing it to someone the other day, it's like staring into the void for like 2 straight months, which humans really aren't great at. Like just standing in front of the
Void
unknown, yeah, and just like hoping that things work out, because there's only a small amount of power that you have as a buyer. Excuse me.
Or as a human in general.
Yeah, or as a human in general. And so you just sort of have to, you can't let yourself get excited because then, of course, you would be disappointed if you don't get it. You can't let yourself disappointed because then you'll give up on trying to get it. So you have to, keep yourself in this weird neutral state, which is very difficult. We're not very good at being in neutral
But
states.
you've watched The
I'm
Crown.
familiar.
You should know everything about that.
So it continues. It continues in a positive direction, but... Who knows? At any point, the whole thing could dissolve. We're not past the point of no return.
No finality yet.
No finality.
All right.
Nope.
Anything
Nor
else
will
going
there
on
be.
in the land of Wooly?
No, that's really pretty much consuming every waking moment.
Gee whiz.
Oh, all right. Not the sleeping one, though,
Yeah.
thankfully. What about you,
Yeah.
Robert?
Sweet
I
release
really
of
don't
sleep.
have much to report. I was racking my brain prior to this to think of something notable, and on a previous podcast I did mention being a slave to the routine, which is fine. But yeah, I've got nothing really noteworthy to report. Just watching Game of Thrones and having way too many conversations about that.
That's right.
Yes.
And we actually had a lot of listeners. I didn't fully appreciate the number of people who, by the time a week later we're having the show, have not seen the episode yet. More importantly, I think what I didn't understand, because I mentioned Thrones last week and I spoiled. Had a
Didn't we all?
spoiler. I didn't warn anybody. I just said it.
Man,
which
Zach.
is I know.
We're in the past the book point now, so you have
Well,
to
that's
be
the
very
problem.
careful with
Is
this.
that there are actually listeners, and I am sorry. I did
I
not
consider
mean to
them
do this.
TV show non-canon.
Yeah, it's interesting. But anyways, regardless, there are people that are listening that have only read the books that are not watching the show, who the things I said were like bombs getting dropped on them.
Yes.
So if that was you, I'm sorry. I will try to refrain, or at least very much warn anytime there are Thrones spoilers happening from anybody. We may just bleep them out. But for me, I actually had an oddly and unintentionally investigative weekend.
Ooh,
In terms of
investigative
tabletop
weekend.
gaming, randomly. So I've been for a long time wanting to check out Time Stories.
Oh.
Had a random opportunity on Sunday. Someone was like, hey, you want to play something? It's like, all right. And it was Time Stories. And then on Monday, I had a family thing, and randomly, my older brother, John, who is a big fan of the old school games that we used to play as kids, was like, hey, do you guys want to play Clue? So I played Clue, and then we played
Nice.
Arkham ahead of this podcast to discuss Arkham Horror LCG. So it was just
The
mystery around.
I will say, I would be very interesting to hear you compare and contrast Clue and Arkham Horror.
That deserves its own podcast.
Gonna take some time.
And
We got one right
here. New theme introduced right here. The thing about Clue that's really interesting for me, because I've played a lot of games, and I've played a lot of really good games and a lot of really bad games. And in the same way that, you might expect it to have been antiquated from a Monopoly standpoint or a Life, the game, where it's like, man, ultimately this is really random and not the best game.
Right.
Clue is actually fascinating to me.
Okay.
Because I actually think it is. There's a caveat to this, but I think it's one of the few childhood games that I've played that holds up as a fantastically excellent game.
Wow.
The reason I say that is I'll explain the first game of Clue we played. It was me, my brother Tim, my brother John playing Clue, and the trick here is that all the players have to be on the same level. Because if we add anyone to that Clue game that doesn't quite quote unquote get it.
Okay.
And they're playing the high level version of Clue, which is
Right.
hilarious to think about.
You guys are playing
High level
high-level
Clue?
version?
We're playing the high level Clue.
Okay.
Because we're all clever and like
Okay.
I've played a lot of games
Sure.
and like there's a way of Clue of playing where you just roll random dice, go to random rooms, and make random guesses to try to
Right.
guess. Because you have to, if you're unfamiliar, you have to guess the person who did the murder, the room they did it in, and the weapon they used.
Yeah.
And you have to be in the room to make an accusation of that room.
Okay.
Or you can make a final accusation, which is just like I call this thing. But if you're just playing the random version, it feels very like luck based and like you don't know what's going on.
Right.
But there is some serious skill in deducing the things that like basically making guesses that give you a lot of information, but also deducing things from the guesses the other players are making.
Okay.
So literally, I won the first game, and going into the last turn, I knew nothing for sure. Just zero.
Okay.
But Tim, thinking I was way closer than I was, makes a final guess, and he had figured out 2 of the 3 pieces. And I can't guarantee that, but the biggest clue I got was from his guess.
I see.
It was just paying attention to what people were, make notes on what they're guessing and what's getting proven and disproved. Then John makes a guess, not a final guess. So Tim did a final guess because he wasn't in the room and he just loses. John did a guess because he was already in the room and got a piece wrong. But that meant now I actually, because I was paying attention, I'm pretty confident I know the answer.
Yeah, you got a ton of information.
So I'm not
there.
even in the room, and I literally am I'm in last place in terms of real information until that turn. And all of a sudden, they do things, and I know exactly what it is. So I guess it, and I get it right, and it's just like, that is crazy.
That's pretty good.
Yeah,
it was a pretty enjoyable experience.
It was very fun. It's obviously, as compared to Arkham, not a cooperative game. But randomly, all the stuff I was doing recently, as far as tabletop, there's no Destiny.
Right? Oh, wow.
It was
That's a
literally
whole
just,
new world.
it's crazy.
You feeling okay?
I'm a little down. Luckily tonight is Star Wars
Shaken.
night at the store, so I'll get plenty of Destiny in. But that said, let's dive into Arkham a little bit. This episode, the 3 of us recently played a session of Arkham. We did the Miskatonic Museum scenario, which
Well,
is
Miskatonic
the first
Museum.
cycle.
Very nice museum.
it's a very nice
It is in
museum.
the first cycle.
A lot of locked doors,
And
though.
we wanted to use this opportunity to talk about Arkham because it is a unique game that is doing some things very different than anything we've seen, and also talk about cooperative games in general.
Yep.
So we're going to be talking a lot about that particular session, and I know, Robert, you've played a lot more than any of us.
Oh, sure.
So of course we had to have the expert in the room. So if you can for me, Robert, I'm going to put you on the Johnny on the spot here.
Here we go.
Me or Robert?
Robert. Johnny on the spot, Robert on the spot. For people who might not be as familiar with Arkham, can you give me like the 2-sentence pitch of like, here's what Arkham Horror, the LCG
Yeah, sure.
is?
It's a cooperative card game kind of casted off of the Lord of the Rings LCG, where you and a team of investigators are going around in a sort of immediate post-Victorian era, battling unknown monsters, demons, those kinds of things, and trying to figure out what they're up to and defeat them in the process. And the game works by essentially building a map of wherever your adventure is going to take place, be it this museum that we just played at. There's one where you're literally on a train. It's quite flexible in its ability to do those kinds of things. So anywho, yeah, you're just trying to figure out what's going on and how to prevent the world from coming to an end.
Which is not what we want.
Yeah.
And I would say it's kind of as board game-ish as you can push a card game before it breaks.
Well, and I think it.
In a good way.
Yeah.
Because the cards connect together through various colors and symbols, so that's easy for people
like
to
form a
recognize.
map or whatever.
To form a map, and then you actually move your pieces around, and the monsters move around on this same map. The upside to all of this is that because it is just cards, they can put out new maps very easily.
Yep.
No problemo, and that's what seems to be happening. And you can also like have stuff change and move around and not necessarily be in the same place every time, but it's also very Lovecraftian in that way.
Sure.
I think for me, some of the highlights here are also the fact that it is a deck building game.
Yep.
So sort of like Lord of the Rings, I think that's what made me interested in Lord of the Rings in the first place. I'm historically wasn't into cooperative games, but played Lord of the Rings, and it's like, oh, it's cooperative, but at the same time, I'm bringing my own unique spin to the table. And the other thing to me is that it very much feels like, you said it's kind of feels board game-ish. I get the sense that it feels a little RPG-ish. Where you basically have a story that's being told, And unlike Lord of the Rings, you had several characters and you were playing a group of people. In Arkham, you actually embody a singular person.
An individual,
and a singular deck, and that deck evolves over time rather than
And you get
being
experience
sort
and
of rebuilt for
weaknesses,
whatever.
and we'll get into more of the mechanical stuff later. So that's kind of Arkham. Now, either of you can take this, or I can take this, field this, but to kind of set up, what is the setup for Miskatonic Museum? Not like technically speaking, but like we're three characters
going down,
and what's kind of happening?
Yeah, so you're literally showing up. There's a town called Miskatonic, and there's a museum in it, and maybe part of a university campus of the same name.
Miskatonic University is a big Lovecraftian location.
Yeah, there you go. So you're there, and you have essentially a lead that you're following up on, that something you need is within this museum, and you're there to get it, but...
it was like the French translation of the
a specific translation of the Necronomicon, and you're trying to get it, but of course hijinks ensue, and there's going to be a lot of things to be sorted out in the process, and it's quite fun.
It is quite fun.
Yeah, and so who are the characters that you guys are playing?
Skids.
Yeah,
I was
Skids
old
O'Toole.
Quickfoot,
Skids O'Toole, that's right.
What's his
dipping
what's
and
his
diving.
rap?
So his deal, Skids' deal, is that he's quick. He can fight. He can't really investigate. He's more of a bruiser.
He's a sly, quick.
He's a sly. He's a rogue, right? He's backstabby. He's
Scoundrel.
Garrody.
But he's not exactly solving any puzzles.
No, he's not solving any puzzles. You got to have the brains for that. So speaking of brains,
Who was the brains?
I was the brains. I was playing Daisy.
I feel like she's your character.
She's very good. Well, she's got some flexibility stuff, but she also speaks to a fundamental in the game, which is investigating. If you don't know, there are clues at the locations which are comprising your map, and you have to pull clues off of locations by performing an investigation challenge. And these clues are literally the things that mechanically allow you to progress the scenario, or as they call it, the acts within the game as you play along.
you are indeed investigators.
Yes.
So investigating is front and center. It
Yes.
is the currency by which you win.
Yeah, and so she very much to me feels like the core objective of the game she accomplishes maybe better than anyone. For
sure. And she came out of the core box, and we've gotten at least one other, they call them Seeker. It's the yellow cards of the game, the Seeker cards. They are very much specialized for investigating clue-centric stuff, that kind of thing. A little bit of versatility with being able to lend support to your other players, which I was doing a little bit. But she's that fundamental aspect is something that I'm always going to gravitate to.
For sure. And I was playing Wendy, who's this like younger orphan girl.
The urchin.
She was red, I think. What's the red class?
That is
Survivor.
Survivor, thank you.
Survivor.
Which is really good.
A lot of cool stuff going on in Survivor.
To me, she felt like a kind of mix between your two characters. She was better at investigating than O'Toole, and worse than
Daisy.
Daisy. I keep wanting to call Daisy Wendy. Worse than Daisy, but she also could fight better than Daisy, but not as good as Skids.
Right.
So I often find myself, it was cool thematically, because I felt like a lot of the times I was off in my own room. As the orphan, and on the flavor of the back of the card, it's like, it's like she doesn't want help from people,
cool.
she's kind of self-independent, whatever. That's the feeling you get. And so it was fun for me. It was like I consistently, not only did I want to embody the character, right, and make decisions that felt like my character, but then it was naturally just happening.
Yeah.
It was like, oh, there's 3 clues over in this one little security office that I could just go get by myself, and I don't need backup, and I don't need,
that's what you think.
If something attacks me, I can beat it up. Or in this case, an encounter comes out that locks the door, I can get out.
Sure.
Because I'm a little crafty.
Sneaky.
So that was
Well, and if you want to talk about, and we have on this podcast before, mechanics and theme and how they influence each other. Whenever you are doing the thing that your deck wants you to do, or your card, the mechanics want you to do, and is also building into the theme, then you've got perfection there. And that's what Arkham does,
great,
really,
right?
up and down.
It is one of the most mechanic and thematic synergistic games that I think I've ever played.
Yeah, the bones are all good, the muscles are all good, and then if you put the flesh on it, not to be too macabre, but that's what that's what it does, which is really great. The other thing I think is really cool about the particular characters we had, and this happens sometimes for me, when this happens in games, this is great. When it doesn't, it is frustrating, especially in RPGs. But I always felt like I was doing a very I had a useful role, and I was doing it well, right? So it's like, if there needed to be something that needed to be stabbed, well, you call little skids, right? And I did it, right? And you don't have that, this happened in D&D all the time, but you come in, guns blazing, here we go, gonna kill the bad guy, roll a natural one.
Especially when you did that spontaneous burglary.
Yeah.
That was very helpful at the time. It ultimately did pan out in spades,
that's where I found that
But
dynamite.
at the time, it was just like, oh no.
I'm gonna take this. But yeah, and I thought that you, with your survival traits, were able to redrawing in the bag, that became very helpful, but that was only something that you could do, right? And Skids could run around and dodge and exhaust this monster that was chasing us, and that's only something Skids could do. And then he's over there taking 30 clues off of a card. That's hyperbolic, obviously, but that's only something that he can do, right? So we were not stepping on each other's toes. We were working in a very nice, teamworky fashion, mechanically, and then as well as personally.
And it's, in a great way, a throwback to all of the things that you learn whenever you play a cooperative game or do anything cooperatively. But it's just, you got to kind of round out your party. If a football team that's nothing but quarterbacks is not really going to do very well.
I like that analogy.
But it's, you need everybody kind of filling in their role. If you played, World of Warcraft or any kind of standard role-playing thing, this, that, or the other, there's specialists. And the synergy of all of those specialists really gets the mission accomplished, and we had that going on yesterday for sure.
Yeah.
So, we have two kind of lines of conversation going on here that I want to dive into. We have the actual what we were doing in the game. We also have the mechanics of this. So let's dive into the scenario a little bit. So we're exploring the museum. We have our characters. I'll start with one of mine, and I'm curious to hear yours. We played we're going to talk about a single session of Arkham here.
Yep.
And to illustrate a lot of these mechanics that we like and a lot of the theme we're talking about, I'd like to go over some of the highlights from our our questing.
Sure.
And I think, to me, one of the biggest highlights was, you mentioned it as a minute ago, which is John's burgling. So John, you can tell early on in the game, it's like, the analogy I would have is when you're playing against someone at a competitive game, and you can tell they're trying to set something up.
Yeah.
Right? They're trying to set a trap up for you or get this thing in play. And it most reminds me back of the first edition Thrones days, where you really needed to kind of lay the groundwork for some big master plan that was happening. And John is you can tell he's kind of maneuvering and you don't know why. And in Arkham, you don't explicitly tell your allies, here's what I've got and here's what I'm trying to do.
Right.
As much as it's like,
I can help you.
I
can take care of that.
My character wants
don't worry.
I want to go over here.
What if we?
So we get to this point, and Robert and I are
It's
both...
very late in the game.
Yeah,
It is very, and by the way, Arkham, if no one has played it before, always starts out, at least to me, pretty easy peasy.
It seems tame at
It
first.
seems tame, and then at the end, it's like, oh, how did this
literally,
happen?
literally hell
The
breaks
drum
loose.
beat
Yeah.
is going up.
Literally.
Yeah.
But, we're kind of going, and we can see the end of, how we need to get to the end. And John's character, Skids, hops into a room, and it's like, Robert and I are both like, oh, he's definitely going to do X, because X is how we're going to get to the end. And instead, he's like, but my character wants to do Y. It's like, and Y is, I want to burgle this room, or I want to do a burglary.
I'm looking to burgle here.
And then I just got I thought it was so funny. I was like, oh man, you just want to burgle. And burgle became the word of the day for me, which I love as a word.
So yeah, for me, it was, I drew all my cards up and I was looking at my hand, and you can see these two cards and they're just magnetized to each other. And it was Double or Nothing, which if you have a successful test, you get to resolve that success twice. And Burgle.
Doubling the challenge of that test.
Doubling the challenge of that test.
Yeah.
Burgle, which allows you, if you were to get a clue, instead...
It was called something else, right?
I'm gonna burgle, something like that.
I don't think it said
That's
burgle.
Mario.
Burglary.
Burglary, probably. Burglary,
yeah. I wish it was called burgle.
Burgle.
But burglary says instead of a clue, if you get a successful test, instead of a clue, you can get money, 3 or 6.
I think it was 6.
3. You got 6
I got
because
6.
of the double.
Right, so I did that thing. It's like, 6.
So you
and
did
then
a heist.
I had a lucky day or whatever it is.
Yeah, the skill booster card. God, I can't remember
Whatever,
which
but
one you
it
played.
basically for I think 3 resources you could then get 10.
Yeah.
So that like put me up quite a bit, which allowed me to play cards, which eventually saved our hides.
Yeah. So,
but in the moment, there were
it was
skeptics.
highly
the
questionable.
thing, though, and I think this is one of my favorite things about cooperative, right? Skids got in the room, and you've seen this in a movie, right? It's like, it's the Frodo at the end of Lord of the Rings. Sorry for the spoiler if you aren't on that train.
Yeah, that would
be
make.
careful.
I
You
think
can't
that's
spoil everything.
Or like you get the character who like gets to the end and it's like, oh, we can complete this movie-long objective if you just hit the button. And then it's like a character who's obsessed with donuts.
Right.
And then he looks to the right and there's just donuts.
right.
Right? And so it's like Skids gets in the room and it's like, I know we're on this mission. It's like,
However,
but that vase is worth $200,000.
Right.
And I
I
need
gotta
that
get it.
vase.
but he didn't even have his hospital debt's weakness out.
No, that's
so-
true. I did not. It was long gone. It had been discarded.
Which is a cool part of that character. But
Yes.
regardless,
It was like it's like Apu in Aladdin, actually.
Yeah.
Whenever he takes the
exactly right.
Uh-huh.
It's like that's exactly it. That's
that
the best.
ruby.
That's
Yeah.
the. But anyways, your face when you got in that room, and then like you just really wanted to burgle.
Yeah.
Me and Robert
But there
looked
was
at
some outrage from the team.
Yeah, Robert and I looked at each other, and I looked back, and I was like, you know what? Skids would burgle. You go for it, buddy.
Burgle.
And you burgled, and just that smile that came across your face from burgling. Luckily, and maybe we'll talk about the dynamite in a minute, but that allowed some things to happen. So that was one of my favorite moments.
It was very good. Actually, I think my favorite moment was outside, inside of the game, quote unquote. Is that first of all we had some cool music on soundtrack music.
Yeah, it was very good.
By our good friend Wesley Slover. It's called Impressions of Miskatonic, and it's on Bandcamp if anybody's interested in looking
Bandcamp?
it up. Yeah, Impressions of Miskatonic by Wesley Slover, everybody, or Wesley Slover.
It's like a
it was
soundtrack
great
for the game.
Yeah,
Yes.
it was fantastic.
Ambient, spooky.
Ambient, spooky, it's made for Arkham. It's really good. And so we're here listening to this ambient, spooky music in this ambient, spooky museum. The doors keep locking on us. There's like terrors coming out. And then all of a sudden, something happens on our roof of the store.
Yeah,
Of the
literally.
store. We're sitting there, the clomp, shake, rattle kind of a thing.
It's like, wait a second.
You're like, wait a second. I mean, there's that millisecond where you're just not sure.
It's like,
you know?
have you seen Stranger Things? Either
sure.
of you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's like when they're playing Dungeons and Dragons in that, and it's like there's really a scary thing happening in real life, right? And it's like, wait a second.
Yeah, exactly.
Did we just open a portal to somewhere? Is there really I don't know the name of the creature, the Long Night or whatever.
Yeah, I was bought in, and now I'm not sure what my reality is anymore.
Yeah.
Even for just a moment, that was really cool.
There were even some sounds in the music itself that had me looking over my shoulder once or twice.
Yeah.
It's like, what was that?
Well, and
That's
it's
creepy.
very speaking of theme and mechanics and all this working with it, I'm very big on music.
So is Robert.
And it's
Robert's a big music
setting
guy
the
as well.
environment. So like you know, music makes you feel a certain way. You
Yeah.
have this kind of like eerie, creepy.
Yeah, if you've ever seen the American version of Kitchen Nightmares, you know.
I have not.
Yeah, they
assume
got
it's
weird
great.
screechy sounds, and
So-
there's always some music.
The
So
old
yours was
reality show
music.
Screech.
That was in our
Yeah, well, it was the music putting us in the mood, and then the combination of that and
the
then
people walking
the
on
tromping on the roof. Because listen, everyone out there, that doesn't happen every day. It's not something we should have been
It's
prepared
usually
for.
only Christmas Eve.
That's right. That's right. Robert had great parents from the clues I'm gathering here.
Yeah, so anyhow, that I really enjoyed that. I also, there's other things that we'll get to, the dynamite, etc., that I enjoyed. I mean, the whole game is just downright
It was
fun.
great because we were talking about, what was it, the L5R tournament business on the previous podcast. And it does a great job of essentially rounding out the storytelling experience that the game does with the gameplays and the tournaments that happen. But it's essentially like a circuitous method of doing storytelling, in that the results of the tournament will then allow somebody to make decisions that will directly impact the story, but you're doing all of that in real time with literally everything
yes.
you're doing in an Arkham game. You know, we have a story about the burglary. We have a pending story about dynamite, and you know, all these kinds of things. They weren't indirect or circumspect.
They're really a story we created.
Correct. You know, you could almost immediately adjourn from your play session and write a narrative.
That's right.
About the things that happened in your thing, and it wouldn't be elaborations or embellishments. It's like, no, we caused all these things to directly happen.
Actually just what happened. Yeah.
Which I would actually very much enjoy reading a good author writing like fan fiction of their Arkham Horror.
It would probably be quite compelling.
I would be like, even just thinking about reading a story about what happened to us in our session, it would be very interesting, because as we'll explain in a second, the way it happened very much felt like a story.
Yeah,
for sure. It was great.
Yeah.
So do you have any, what's your prime, any prime highlights?
I really enjoyed the burglary was very funny and a kind of a meta aspect, but I do want Jonathan to go ahead and get it off his chest and tell his dynamite story, because it's a card that I seldom see played, but I'm a big fan of nonetheless.
Well, 5 resources is a big deal.
It's expensive,
I mean, it may be worth kind of just telling the story.
Sure.
So we get in the museum. You have to break in.
So we don't break in. We tap on the glass. We say, "Hey, Mr. Security Guard, we need in here because we don't want to know, but we need
Trust
in here.
us.
Trust us. It'll
You
be
need
fine."
us into the, and he'd only been there a week.
You were in great danger.
He'd only been working a week. He didn't want to deal with it. He thought something creepy was going on, so he let us in.
Yeah. Which, by the way, he then joined our party, and we couldn't let him die, or
else.
I didn't. He hung out with me.
We had to help.
He went with the orphan child.
Nice.
I guess I wasn't alone that whole time.
You got adopted.
So anyhow, we go in there. We get to the thing. We look for some clues. We find out that there's like blood stains. So we got to go back deeper into the museum. Anyhow,
And in that moment too, I want to explain mechanically. They did this incredibly well. So you have the entrance where you start, and then you go to the halls of the museum, and then connected to that is like a security office and an administrative office. And so those are rooms you can go in. You can gather clues off of these locations, and you need clues. You need 3 clues. You have to spend 3 clues when you're in the halls in the middle room to basically go down a hall and unlock another room.
Yeah.
And there are 6 total rooms that you could unlock, and they're random, and you're looking for one in particular that you know is going to be one of the last 3 that you explore.
Yeah.
And so you just have this cool like vibe of like, well, we're exploring the museum at 1 in the morning. There's no one here.
And the art is fantastic, and the flavor text is fantastic. Well worth a read.
So we go about exploring this museum.
Yeah, well, the first thing that I remember, the big moment for me, is that Skids runs in, as he is wont to do, or explores ahead, I think is a better way of saying that, just in case there's any trouble. And there's a creeping terror that begins to stalk him. And Skids is able actually to immediately dodge the terror and go with the terror. And that was pretty cool. And so then it went back into the void, and that was, everything's fine. But unfortunately, that was not the end of the terror. And all the while we're exploring these creepy places, we are like really having these weird flashbacks, flash forward kind of a thing. Mechanically, we're losing cards, but the story element of it is like we can't tell what's past, we can't tell what's present. There's creepiness in the rooms, like we are starting to forget ourselves, and then there's also this sort of slithering terror that is constantly a threat.
Well, and I think that's one of the cool. I remember playing an Arkham scenario that was like you start off in an alley and you go into a bar, and there's like cronies and all these potential enemies around that aren't necessarily enemies yet. And in this case, it's literally us cruising a museum, and there's one threat.
That's
there's one
the only
creepy
enemy that is in the deck, as far as I can tell, is just one kind of weird thing that comes in and out of the void.
It reminded me a lot of like Alien. Alien movie, where it's like we're all kind of on the ship and trying to find a thing, and then like disappearing or getting locked in rooms, or none of this.
The door locking was actually really cool. Like that's like Haunted House 101 right there.
Yeah,
it was the perfect amount of inconvenience and the perfect amount of threat and the perfect amount of creepiness all sort of tied in.
There was in Arkham, there's a mechanic where once a round for each player, they draw an encounter card. And so randomly, one of these encounter cards is like locked door. Put this on the room that has the most clues left. And it's like if you're in the room, you're just locked in. and if you're out of the room to get in,
You have to like lock pick it or smash it down.
Yeah.
Which is great. So that happened. We did a little bit of lock picking. We did a lot of clue searching. We opened hall after hall after hall, and finally, we get to the last hall,
which is the one we're looking for.
Yes,
We're
of course it
looking
was
for.
dead last.
Now, mechanically, all this while, we've been just dumping cards out of our hand, especially Robert.
And there's a lot of like those encounter cards come up that are like do
Dump cards out of your
a
hand.
brain test of 5, and
Yep.
if you fail by 2, you have to discard the top 2 cards of your deck.
correct.
And we're just like-
losing deck,
we're
right?
getting-
You know what? This is
Yeah.
actually not that big of a deal. You don't lose in Arkham if you lose with your deck. That's
However.
just fine. And then like 4
Well,
rounds.
that's what I was wondering, because it was like it kept having me
Yeah,
discard
it was
cards.
only at the tail end of
Yeah.
our experience as well. There's a card that says if you run out of cards to draw, or if you have no cards in your library, something like that.
Yeah.
if your deck is empty.
Yeah, you were essentially going to take, no matter how much you have, lethal damage.
Yep.
And that's why I kept discarding cards. I was like, "There's no."
Yeah, it didn't seem bad, right?
Yeah,
It
yeah,
didn't
it's just
seem
like,
a
oh,
big
well, we
deal.
can
Yeah,
reset,
it's like,
no
all right, that's
bigs.
fine. And then all of a sudden,
Suddenly.
boom.
Yeah.
It's like Robert has like 2 cards in his deck.
And Robert's been
and he
doing
gets
all the
this card.
exploring.
It's so fun.
And it's like,
Yeah.
all right, well, clock's ticking. We
Perfect
got
storm.
4 turns at best
Yep.
to
I
get
think it
out
was
of
2
here.
turns. Robert had 2.
Yeah, I
left
had
in
2
there.
turns left.
Oh, dang.
And when Robert's in the final room, there's 6 clues, so it's going to take some time to get all those clues out. But it's like, if he draws an encounter that makes him discard it, like I always consistently hit an encounter, discard 2 or 3.
Right.
It's like he could just draw an encounter and be out of here.
Yes,
Yeah.
true. Yeah.
And they were on, and it was beautiful because not only did I get perfect stormed and essentially got killed, but then an obscuring fog settles in the room,
yes.
which makes the difficulty for completing those investigations. There was like literally 1 left, and it's like,
And
suddenly it's harder to do, and with our weakest investigators present, and all this kind of thing, it's like it was only by the hair of our chinny chin chin did we get out of that.
And
Indeed.
to clarify too, we don't win unless we get all the clues off that
Correct.
last location.
Right, right.
Another, probably mechanically, which we'll hit on in a minute, one of my favorite things about this kind of game is that, same with time stories actually, you don't fully know how you're going to win until you get into the game.
Yeah.
And so the story naturally unfolds instead of it being like, in Netrunner, I know I'm trying to score 7 agenda points
Right,
kind of a thing.
right.
It's, well, you have to, so it naturally puts you in this explorer mindset.
Right.
It's like I have to go find out what I'm trying to do. Anyway, so we get to the last room, Robert's in there, fog hits.
Yep. Robert, well,
We'll get into your dynamite.
so
You gotta get
yeah,
back to
well,
the dynamite.
the thing is that on the last room, I think no matter what, the horror,
this slithering horror thing was actually in the next room over.
The next room
and
over.
it has a trait that means that it's going to enter our room, and
It's
when
hunting
it's
us,
in
yeah.
our room, we cannot investigate
right.
to get these clues
That's
that
right.
must
So
come
we
up.
have to keep him off or get him off
Or
the board.
you have
Right.
to either kill him
Also,
or keep him
side
occupied.
note, every time we kill this creature,
it gets stronger.
if he comes back, which he does through these encounter cards, he comes back stronger.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah. So that had been going on
a
a
real
little
pain.
bit. So anyhow, what had happened was he was actually in the room with Robert and the clues, and it could have been a very bad deal because Robert, again, is almost dead.
And he's like the guy that can get our clues.
He's the guy that can get the
first.
clues, and we can't even look for clues as like a last-ditch effort unless this thing is gone. But, as fate would have it, I pull out my encounter deck, and it's slithering in the darkness.
This is the luckiest thing that could have happened.
Beelines right for Skids, who's in a different room.
Yeah, it's
Correct.
like the encounter John pulls is like if I don't remember the name of the creature. If he's not engaged with you, he now engages with
Yep.
you. So he hops out of that room, hops to John.
Yeah, so now Robert has a clear,
Which is a stroke of luck.
It's
I
a
can't
stroke
tell
of
you.
luck.
Luck,
Yep.
yeah.
Between the monster and the fog, it was looking
Well, and there was
dim.
also, you drew yourself an Elder Sign towards the end there as well that helped us out quite a little bit. And I think it was on the investigation part.
yeah.
So we had a pretty like Robert took a hit, but then we had a shift of luck, and then I was able to dodge the slithering terror
So you dodge into the room
into
Robert's
another
in,
room, and then whoosh,
and then you wish some dynamite into
throw
the room.
some dynamite over to the old boy
Just blow the whole
and
thing up.
only made possible
by the burglar
because of your burgle.
because of the burglar.
Because of the burgle.
I found
Which,
some-
I mean, all roads lead to Rome somehow. And it was a really magical thing that happened.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
It was like as if you instinctually knew,
I'm going
like-
to need this money.
I have to personify
draw
my
that
character,
card.
and Skids is like, I need this money.
Well, again, I mean, it's mechanics driving theme, or mechanics and theme going well
Now-
together. Because if Skids has expensive cards, Skids needs money, so Skids got to get that cash.
We takes the money.
Now, the interesting question for me about the theme there is, I'm curious where and who in the museum Skids bought dynamite from.
Oh no, he came in with that stuff.
Yeah, either that or he found it. He could. The thing is, here's what I was thinking: is
In
that
the museum?
Yeah,
But he spent money on
the,
it.
maybe it's like some sort of Explorer edition. Well, that's the
think
thing, and
Skids
that's,
just
this
packs
is
it.
why
He's got one
Matt
stick all
refers
the time.
to it as maybe. This is why Matt refers to it as resources instead of money, and why they're boxes in the core set instead of any sort of definable thing.
That makes a lot of sense.
Like so. Whenever story-wise, in my mind, whenever old Skids is burglaring the room, instead of looking for clues, which are things that can help the story along, he's looking for things that can help Skids, right? And so maybe that is a stick of dynamite.
Or his Nana, who's in the hospital.
Effectively, what's the name of the word when you're speaking generally about it? But effectively, he found 10 resources. 5 of those resources ended up being dynamite.
That's right.
So he actually found dynamite.
He actually found dynamite.
If we were telling the story.
That's
Like,
correct.
It's like, oh, he burgles and he didn't get the vase. He got some dynamite and some other cat things.
Maybe it's like an old, like an Explorer exhibit, and they got some dynamite. They were blowing up some mountains. They found something.
Yeah,
Fusing
and you know,
They're ready to go.
for me, the other moment that we haven't hit on is, so there's 6 clues on this location. Robert on that first turn gets 3, then the monster jumps in. And then, I think on the next round through, and I was able to get 1 of the clues that round, so we were down to 2. And on that next turn, he did draw the encounter card. He had to discard cards.
He bites it.
He bites it. Robert down. And now it's like, well, the problem is we still have the fog.
Yeah.
So you did your dynamite trick, and then you were in the room, and I cleared, I think, 1 more of the. We were down to 1 clue.
Yeah.
But the fog made the shroud value of that location 5, and you have to beat that to discover the clue.
Right. And it's not easy. There's not many pluses in that old chaos.
And your
In fact,
investigate.
quite the opposite.
I think it's
Your
like
investigate was like
3 or 2.
3.
Somewhere
No, it was a 2.
It was a 2.
And you had a flashlight.
I had. God
So-
bless the flashlight.
So the flashlight
Those
is
are
a
recent
money
additions, yeah.
maker. So you can spend an action and a token to investigate, and the shroud is -2.
Yep.
So now you have to hit a +1, which there are only there's 15 tokens in the chaos bag, roughly. I don't know the actual number. And there's only 3 in there that could work. And the flashlight's you used it.
Yeah.
And it's gone.
Yeah.
So this is your 1 shot, and then I will get 3 shots to get lucky effectively.
Yep.
And you draw your token, and you get the +1. And we win. And it was a very, it's like, I think setting it apart as a cooperative game.
Yeah.
It's like we were all legitimately
Very happy.
because Robert had just died.
Yep.
It was looking
Not in
dim.
vain.
Not in
And
vain.
then all of a sudden, it's like a celebration. We're
Yeah.
happy, and it's a cool moment in a cooperative game too.
It's a team win.
Suffer
Yes.
through
Yeah.
it
Yes.
and win, even though Robert did bite the dust for
Yeah.
the team.
But yeah, you get a story out of that. You
Now-
get a group win, which is always very, very good. I mean, when there are no losers,
That's fun.
That's a nice thing.
That's
right?
a that's
Yeah,
a
good
that's a
deal.
community building
Yeah,
fun
yeah.
thing. So now I'm not sure, and just for clarity's sake on the Arkham train, if we had been another thing that kind of sets it apart. Lord of the Rings was very much like we're doing this quest, you make it to the end to win,
Right.
and you either win or lose.
Sure.
And they introduced in the Saga expansions like items that carry with you quest to quest and that kind of thing. But in Arkham, it's inherently built to continue on.
Sure.
So how have we been continuing on? How does that work? Do we gain experience? You died. So what does that look like?
First of all, cool thing, we actually got to decide if we kept or burnt.
Yes, there's usually a decision to be made at the end of the thing. I mean, not usually, but there can be a decision to be made. So, for example, the thing we were looking for was this Necronomicon book. We find it, and then you have a choice. Do you want to keep it or destroy it?
Which will have an impact on later sessions down the line.
True. Well, you can only imagine because you're being prompted to do something with
Right.
a thing, but you don't know what the implications are going to be because part of the generalized theme of Arkham as a rule is that this is unknown and it's terrifying as a result. So you're just kind of coping and coming up with it in real time to try to stay ahead of these timeless horrors kinds of stuffs. But anywho, what was the question? I'm sorry.
Going
how
forward.
would the campaign have worked had we
So yeah,
been
you,
continuing?
you can, of course, choose to keep or destroy the book, but then along the way there are either locations that you go to, so like the main museum hall or whatever it happens to be, that will have what they call victory points on them, and it'll say like 1 or usually it's 1, maybe sometimes 2 if it's a lot. Those victory points are then translated at the end of your session into experience points and cards. can have versions of themselves that either have 0 or many victory pips on them is what they're called. 1 pip is equivalent to 1 victory point. You can go up to 5 pips, and the number of pips is generally proportionate to the potency of that card. So if it has no pips, it's kind of like, it's all right. But if you have the same version of the card, same named card, and now its upgraded version has 5 pip, it's going to be just perfect. Icing on the cake kind of a thing. So you get to sort out all of those pips, choose where you want to invest them to either round out your weaknesses, maximize your strengths, that kind of a stuff. So Daisy at this point now is just an investigating machine. She definitely got maxed out.
I could see that.
Yes. But she also is quite vulnerable, as you also saw, to taking damage and really being hardy in the face of all this stuff.
Yeah. And you take that deck with you, right? That's not just a new deck.
And you build it over the course of the campaign.
And if you fail, you have things called, what are they, permanent traumas, I believe.
That's what I was going to say, because you died you got knocked out or whatever you want to call it.
I was defeated. There's a lot of terms, I can't remember which one specifically I was being subjected to. But anywho, they can, if you are defeated or get knocked out, that kind of a thing, you essentially have additional weaknesses that can be folded into your deck. And long story short, the game is just going to be that much harder for you going down the line because it's like, I've already been through this. I'm traumatized, or I am now maimed or something, that kind of a thing. I'm not going to be able to be as shipshape as I used to.
And that's one of the, again, there's so many things about this game that are different for me, which is in this scenario, and in I think every scenario, at any point you could literally take actions to get to the front door and leave. Because there is a negative permanent effect
Resign.
on losing all your health.
Exactly.
Right? And you, whether it's gaining weaknesses or traumas or whatever, which is so different. Right? There's no point in Lord of the Rings where it's like, I'm just going to leave the quest. It's like, I'm out. I don't
you can resign at any point, which is cool. It's like, I didn't get
you got to get there, though.
That's
you can't just
you got to get out of there. Get out of
Dodge. Get to that door.
Oh man! Well, that was any other notable moments for you guys before I want to get to some more mechanical questions for you.
Nothing specific, but it was just on the whole incredibly enjoyable. I can't remember even when I've occasionally not succeeded with the team in accomplishing the mission. It is always so rewarding, so enjoyable. I can't remember the last time, even Lord of the Rings, which is kind of the apple of my eye for many years, where I enjoy playing a game as much as I do for Arkham.
Yeah, I would agree.
Good stuff.
It's very enjoyable.
Just on a highlight level, for someone curious about checking into Arkham, which I think if you haven't, you should. It's worthwhile, even as a very competitive person. If you had to pick, what is the one mechanic of Arkham that is most appealing or most notable to you?
I got one.
I have an answer as well. Yeah, we'll give you some time, John.
For me, it's how they make the map work. So as a comparative, if and when you've played Lord of the Rings, you would have locations in that game, but they were essentially in this amorphous, homogenized pile in the center of the board, and they really had no distinction amongst themselves about where they were relative to each other, or even where you are amongst them, kind of a thing. They were just things that you could elect to travel to, as it were, and explore, that kind of a thing. With Arkham, we made mention to it kind of building a map previously. It very much does that. You see on each individual card how, particularly in this museum, for example, how each room either joins up to another or not. So you get a very readable at face value, if you want to even position them appropriately, feel and look for where and what's going on, because it's like, I'm way over here in this room, and it's like 2 or 3 or 4 rooms over is where this monster is, or where my other teammate happens to be. And for me, that is a critical element into really feeling like I'm in the setting, because it's that much more appreciable, and it doesn't just seem kind of like, you're in Middle Earth, and it's just like, okay.
Well, and, Lord of the Rings
kind of a thing
felt more linear,
yes,
and less dynamic in that way, where you would feel like you were on the
or
fields.
just ill-defined kind of a thing.
Because I remember a quest where it's like you're going through the forest on the second stage of the quest, and they made the locations felt like that and whatnot.
Yeah.
But it, that ability, the ability to be dynamic and mobile on that map, where it's like in Lord of the Rings, it's very front to back.
Yeah.
You start here, you're going to end here. Versus Arkham, where it's like you can go anywhere in the museum at any point. It's not,
And you know exactly how to get there.
it's not the time is not defined by the game as much as your playing of it.
Correct. I
An
agree.
actual experience of it. So it is very different that way.
Yeah.
Did you figure one out yet?
I mean, not really. I do enjoy the Chaos Bag. I think that is a really novel way of expressing the sort of mysterious dread.
I agree.
You're reaching into the void rather than rolling a dice. I mean, it's the same kind of idea, but the way that it's done, it's thematic.
It's the mechanic.
It's thematic, and I mean, to expand that, the mechanics of this game work so well with the theme of this game that it is just fantastic.
I think that's what really makes it so attractive up front. Because we played the first couple of games, and again, I've never really been into cooperative games or Arkham as a theme, and immediately knew. It's like, there is something about this game.
And even as a comparative to the contrary, and no fault to it, and it's not a critique, it's just a personal bias of mine. It remains one of the things that kind of keeps me out of being really enthusiastic or into Star Wars Destiny, is that there isn't anything appreciable, at least as far as I can tell, about their macro mechanical function that to me feels or is Star Wars. It's like you've got cards and they have dice and you're rolling them, and yeah, the effects in and of the cards themselves have, obviously some Star Wars tie-ins, but in terms of like the macro situation of how the game actually plays, it's just kind of general to me. But like the Chaos Bag.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's quite Arkham-y. The map thing, it's like, oh no, we're actually here and we're doing stuff, that kind of a thing. We're telling a story, just like if you were reading a Lovecraft novel or something.
Like you would
like
expect
that.
a bag of things, that vibe of a thing to exist in that universe.
100%.
Yeah.
Versus like the only dice we see in Star Wars is the chance cube.
Sure.
So it's not exactly the biggest Star Wars.
Correct.
Yeah, it's not sort of folding it onto itself with
Yeah,
theme.
yeah, which it would be difficult to do, I think, in that case. But for me, the thing outside of a lot of the stuff we've already touched on, I really, 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 really enjoy the peril mechanic.
Yes.
Which is basically if you draw an encounter with a peril mechanic, and you're the only one that gets to see it.
Yeah.
And in Lord of the Rings, it's kind of how it's supposed to work, where you draw your encounter card and then do your thing.
Correct.
It doesn't always work like that, and it mainly not because of it being a big deal, but it's because it's not that big of a deal. It's like for everyone at the table of Lord of the Rings to see my card is not going to really affect anything.
Sure.
But in the peril version,
It can.
like I drew one that was name one of the 3 primary card types. Everyone has to discard all of that card type in their hand.
Oh, gosh.
And so this is a
It's
decision I have
devastating.
to make without talking to my
No
team.
consult.
And I
Yeah.
can't be like, events, and see your faces.
Yeah.
Whereas if I flip the card over, you could see it, and you're
Yeah.
like, oh man, please don't pick events.
Yeah.
So I think the reality of they're making peril a mechanic, so much so that when it hits, it's a significant hit. I really like that.
And even in the midst of, working as a team, there are those moments where it's like, no, you're alone in this. And that's scary,
Yeah.
especially
You've
in
got
the
to
setting.
You gotta
pick.
do it.
You have got to pick, but it's not all the time.
Exactly.
It was a nice
Just
touch.
enough to spice it up.
Sure.
Keep it fresh.
So last thing for me on this topic, and talking a little bit more generically about cooperative games, I am more and more a fan of cooperative games than I've ever been, and I like to see it. I feel like Arkham is a very big evolution for that space.
Yes.
Both in terms of, again, to me, it's somewhere in between a card game, a board game, and an RPG. And they evolved all 3 by reaching some midpoint. And they're doing things that I haven't seen a board game do, or I haven't seen an RPG do, or a card game do, which is very cool. But like I said earlier, Arkham for me is not a primary theme. Right? Obviously, Star Wars, I'm a big Star Wars fan. I've been on camera and on podcasts saying that over and over and over.
Play.
Really? First time heard it.
But if you could pick, what themes might you like to see explored in a cooperative manner? And I have an example, so you guys can have a second to think. I just dropped a bomb on John. His face is great.
Dang, man. Yeah, that's anything.
But I'm excited. We're going to Gen Con next week. We'll be doing a lot of content and even an episode or 2 of the podcast very soon about before and after and all that. But there's a game called The Hunt for the Ring, which is semi-cooperative. But the basic setting is one player is Frodo and the Hobbits, and then the other players are the Nazgul. And it's set in between.
Yeah, pretty cool.
It's set in between Bag End and the Prancing Pony.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of I think it's Letters from Whitechapel, where you're trying to
Find
the Ripper.
Yeah.
And he's kind of hidden. And I haven't seen the game, but I assume it'll feel like that, where it's like the Nazgul are the actual protagonists, as you were, trying to hunt down this one thing.
This pesky ring destroyer.
Yeah, so I'm very excited both to beat multiple Nazgul at the same time as Frodo, and also work as a team with other Nazgul to like
and find this tricksy
hunt
hobbit.
him down.
Yeah, man.
So any themes in particular that stick out to you that you'd like to see ventured in this cooperative space?
Forever and always.
Dune.
Dune. Bus. Like, can we
Dune.
finally get a really quality game for that? I know it's something about the rights holders are just never going to let it go.
Yeah.
But sadly, that remains to me just the crowning jewel that is untouched, because it is a rich world filled with so much opportunity, so many worlds, so many characters. It's just ready to get blown up.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, I mean, I would only say I really enjoy the cooperative games where everybody has a function. There's been a lot of them coming out. Captain Sonar, sort of a good example of this. If you were playing against the computer, the game, so to speak. Stuff like that, I think that's cool. I mean, any cooperative game. I think a lot of people are seeing that this is a really good way to play. It's a very fun experience for everybody, and a really good way to get people into gaming as well. So I think it's a really cool space, and I think that Arkham, honestly, is leading.
Sure.
At least as far as card games goes.
I'm,
Card games go.
I'm really interested to see what kind of cooperative games. I think the success of Arkham will allow for other games to start getting innovated on and invested in.
Yep.
And I think in a not so innovative way, in a similar setup as Arkham, I would be very curious to see like a almost like a superhero style game where you're embodying a superhero. It doesn't even have to be mainline like you're Superman. It's like, I think it'd be more fun as like, have you seen the show Heroes?
Yeah.
Chance?
Yeah.
Where like all of a sudden people start getting like superhero abilities, but typically it's like, this guy gets flight, and this girl gets the ability to like heal herself very quickly.
Grow her fingernails real long.
Yeah, exactly. But not like Superman has all of these powers.
Sure.
It's like they get
Right.
power. So I think it could be a pretty Heroes actually would be a great setting for this. Where it's like you have a character, and they get their one thing. Anyways, I would be curious to see that.
Yeah, that'd be neat.
All right, there you have it. We're going to move on to some questions and answers. You can use the hashtag AskCovenant and get your questions answered on the Covenant Cast. We'd be happy to answer them.
Answers and questions.
First question. Last week we asked, what clan are you going to play? And Alan Jones, someone who frequently comments on the show, said, I've been torn by this decision, which is rare for me because the clans look like they have something unique and exciting to offer, all the clans. However, my current thoughts are towards Crab or Dragon. This is because they both employ strategies that are in other card games where there is I forget, what's that concept?
Mono no aware.
That's it. He said it. Or character impermanence, considered subpar. Crab have the ability to sacrifice characters to gain extra value, and dragons stack many cards onto their bigger units. As mentioned, these are bad value decisions in other card games, but when your board state is not permanent, they become good. Return question, what clans are you guys leaning towards from what we have seen so far? Kind of answer, kind of question. I'll go ahead and give mine. I've been actually playing, getting ready for Gen Con and content and whatnot, using the spoilers that have been spoiled. Printed out some of the cards to try to get some games in and learn the mechanics a little better. And I'm really starting to develop an appreciation for the game.
Oh,
Like
no, not an appreciation for the game.
Getting a taste.
I was hesitant. It seemed very dense and nuanced, and now I'm getting a little more cozy in the elements. But that said, to answer the question, I, at this point, am down to Dragon and Phoenix. Lion was on my list originally. I'm not a Scorpion or a Unicorn or a Crane. Gosh,
Definitely
darn
not a
cranes.
crane.
No, you're not a crane.
But I had Lion on the list, and they very much feel like the aggro rush, lots of dudes
Right.
clan.
Which you've been known to do. Actually, you're more of a burn. Sorry.
Well, it's like Swarm and X-Wing or something. Anyways, so I'm currently down to Phoenix and Dragon. I like the idea of building a single character with all the old attachments in Dragon.
Mm-hmm.
Seems risky.
Yeah.
My gamer brain is just like
Red alert.
Red alert. Don't put too many things on one guy. Don't
Yeah.
bank too much on one guy. But yeah, I'm currently Dragon or Phoenix.
Nice. I would probably go Dragon as well. Back up, probably Lion.
Ooh.
Mm-hmm.
I think right now
It's Scorpion, isn't it? I'm just kidding.
No, yeah, goodness gracious.
He's a
Not
crab
like
man.
Scorpion.
I'm a crab man. At least I think I'm a crab man. Although I do, one of the things I've never quite figured out about myself is whether I really do like defense or I really do like mobility. I'm not sure because you can't have both, right?
No.
They're very different. But if crab,
At least not the same.
like Alan is saying, if crab is able to have a viable strategy through defense, which is so hard to do in a game.
Yeah.
It's so hard to do. If they're able to have an actual viable strategy
That'd
through
be great.
defense, that would be awesome. Like Legion in Arena Rex, for instance, is probably the best example of this working, and then there are infinite examples of it not working. So if crab can do it, I am very much a crab man. I am very interested to see how that plays out. If not, unicorn actually looks pretty good. The previous went up, so I'm
They
kinda
actually
hyped.
the preview just literally went up, and it does seem like they're like Fast and Furious.
Yeah.
Which is fun.
Yeah.
I liked they had a province that when it gets attacked and gets revealed, it just immediately breaks.
Yeah.
But your opponent has to discard one of their attacking characters. Just like,
Yeah.
ouch.
I like having options. That's pretty cool.
All right, next question. It's from It's Matastrophic on YouTube. Speaking of L5R, how do L5R organize play announcements incentivize growing the scene as much as possible? The fact that all of the fun stuff is focused on the winningest players of various stripes at the biggest events is concerning. Last week we talked a lot about this.
Whoa, P.S. Beauty is its own purpose.
I missed the PS.
I think that's important to get on the record.
So I think the truth here, because we were talking about the prizes and how they're, the thing for me is a lot of the prizes do incentivize winning the game that you're playing, but they aren't for the people that are just winning the tournament.
Sure.
So whether it is the clan that has the most honor getting something across the entire clan that's very cool, or it's the fact that like
Best performer of any faction.
performing of each faction, also
Which is
just
always a good one.
Yep.
Really encourages some outside.
I think
outside
the
play.
main thing for me is that they are, even the prizes that are like trade at the beginning of the round, the prizes that are finished, round 4 and 5 and get this thing. And so really the trick for me is that you can see they're starting to experiment with this idea of what actions outside of just winning the tournament can we incentivize?
Right.
Whether it is higher honor, even though the games that attract there are the games that you win, it's basically saying, because you also don't want to encourage losing.
Right.
Because then that's
easy
not
to
fun,
do.
right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, not only is it. This is very interesting, right? Talk about the last person wins problem in a race. That stops, right?
No one's racing.
No one's racing.
And
right?
that's yeah.
There's a floor, and so you can't run too far. I think people right now are overly sensitive. Not overly sensitive. They're overly worried about that, and I think there are probably more things they can do to incentivize doing the more exciting things. But that said, there is a floor if you start rewarding like people who just don't win at all.
And I think that's
it's a delicate balance.
They're basically counting honor in games that you win, which makes sense because, like, honestly, if your clan's doing really bad halfway through the tournament, all of a sudden you could say, stop trying to win, only gain honor.
Right.
And if that's all you're trying to do, you're going to be the clan with the most honor.
Which is cool.
So they still want to incentivize you to win. We're going to count the honor when you win a game.
Yeah.
But it's a secondary, like, if you can win with more honor than anyone else is winning, then you get this prize.
Right.
Sure.
So
and like I said, there are ways to do this, and you touched on it a little bit earlier. Is that this is an experiment, right? This is the first time FFG has ever done anything like this, and it's going to change, and it's going to get better, and it's going to evolve as all things do. But this first step is certainly a really encourageable first step.
It's robust, if anything.
Well, and the other thing I'd like to mention too is that we talked a while back about the sustainability of LCGs and the reality of we can give players reasons. Players can have reasons to show up that aren't exclusively just to win the tournament for themselves or the prizes they're in. And I think, again, when you're asking how does it incentivize growing the scene as much as possible, the truth is I'm asking people right now, right? Because I'm starting to dive into L5R in the store, people that are interested, and it's like, what clan are you planning on playing, right? And the reason that is, I didn't ask in Destiny. It's like, well, light side or dark side,
Right,
which characters are you playing? And the truth is that when you are playing as part of a team, all of a sudden you're not just showing up for you.
Right.
You're not just showing up to win. It's like you're showing up to give Phoenix Clan the best representation it can at an event. And I am certain there will be prizes and incentives for
Most
clans
people that
doing
show
well.
up.
Maybe a patch.
Maybe a patch. We will see. I know those went over well back in 2011. But, you know, even just the reality of, like, what happens if there is a prize that is only given to someone if they are the only person at a tournament playing a clan?
Right.
Yeah.
It's like...
They'll probably get a playmat.
It's like, again, you can incentivize anything. And so you could also have a prize for the clan that gets the most people to show up.
Right.
And, like, that's really easy. It's
Yeah.
like, oh...
Everybody's crab today.
Everyone's crab today. A
We're
little
all
crabby day.
Today we're all crab.
All right, and that's, I mean, we had a whole podcast about it. We could talk forever about it, and we'll talk again in the future about it. We got plenty of stuff at Gen Con, I'm sure, about this very exact thing. So we will see. Final question from Matt A. Alves on Facebook. How do you think the meta will change with Empire at War expansion for Star Wars Destiny? Also, will we ever see Maul or Yoda? I'll go ahead and
Go ahead and give
field
this one a swing there, Zach.
Yep. To answer the second question first, will we see Maul or Yoda? I'm about 100,000,000% confident. I think we'll see all the major characters. In fact, Lucas did a panel early on that said it said if you know name your favorite character in Star Wars, and then he was talking to the audience, and then it's like, all right, that character will be in Destiny. It's like
Nice.
It's just the expectation.
They're not gonna stop.
They're just gonna keep
Yeah,
hitting
until-
Three
and-
releases a year, they will cover. everything.
I'm waiting for the Devorian that Luke meets in the cantina. I forgot his name.
You have the horns.
Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
specific.
In the original
Very niche.
trilogy.
All
right,
right, yeah.
One, that's my favorite character. Once he gets hemmed in, I will.
I'm waiting for Brainiac.
But we already got 2 Darth Vaders, so I mean,
That's right.
it's gonna come.
Well, Vader and Baby
A Vader and
So
every-
how will the meta change? I think this is actually a very cool. We're I don't know, a month or two out from Empire at War, and the thing that is, I think you actually might be excited about this for some reason. You can tell me if you're not or not, John.
I'm already
But
excited.
the two things that I think, as we've seen from the previews at least so far, that are being hit on is the support for supports, which is the vehicles
I
and
do love those
those
vehicles.
cards. And you have cards that are, there's a 2-cost event that is reduce the cost of a vehicle, or I think it's a vehicle, or support, for every character you have in play. So a 4-character deck now gets to pay 2, gets -4.
Cool.
So you can play a 4-cost vehicle early.
That's
also,
neato.
those decks with 3 or 4 characters have a lot of characters with health, so they get to be around longer, so
Yep.
the value of those vehicles actually is up as well. You also have General Hux, who can reduce the cost of a card for every character you have in play, which is
Nice.
special. And so I think what you're going to see is not only more supports happening,
Mm-hmm.
and this is the first set that was designed after the game came out,
Yep.
which
And,
is worth
and
noting.
with Jeremy on it.
And with Jeremy, who's the now co-developer.
Mm-hmm.
But you also, hopefully, what we've seen is a pretty big prominence of 2 and 3 character decks.
Yep. Mhm.
And I think we're going to see even more deck options because of character combinations and whatnot. But my dream state of Destiny in some future day is that you have 2 character decks
Mm-hmm.
that are both elite, that have 4 total dice, 3 character decks that
Mm-hmm.
have 1 elite with 2 characters, and then 4/5 character decks that have 4 or 5 dice.
Yeah.
And each of those are kind of archetypes that play very differently,
Yep.
which is you have elite characters, they can activate a lot of dice all at once
Mm-hmm.
and have very powerful effects. You have the mid-range kind of stuff, which is a little bit slower, takes a little bit longer turns, doesn't get to claim the battlefield as much as the 2 cost, but also has more health and has more options. Then you have the 4-character swarm, which takes forever because it's a group of stormtroopers. But at the same, and they're not fast. They're not doing a lot fast. They're never claiming the battlefield, but they just keep coming at you.
Yeah, they can just
right?
keep you down.
And I think if you have that, all of a sudden decisions like do I run Thermal Detonator are very interesting because Thermal Detonator is 3 to all your opponent's characters.
Yep.
Against a 2-character meta, which is what we had at Awakenings, not a great card. It's fine, but you have to discard the card to do it. If a bunch of 4-character decks start popping up, very interesting. And it lets them play with things like reduce the cost of something for every character you have.
Yeah.
To kind of reinforce that. So I think we'll see the rise of that.
That's cool. I think that'd be really neat.
The rise of the Empire. There you have it. We're out of here. Question from us to you to answer. Leave it in the comments. What's your favorite cooperative game and why? Until next time, keep playing.